Hi guys, welcome. This is SMB Designs and I am Stephanie. We are picking up this week in the book of Enoch in chapter 70, and I'll just start there. And it came to pass after this that during his lifetime his name was raised up to the Son of Man, and to the Lord of spirits from among those who dwell on the earth. And he was raised aloft on the chariots of the Spirit, and his name vanished among them. And from that day I was no longer numbered among them, and he placed me between the two winds, between the north and the west, where the angels took the cords to measure the place for the elect and righteous for me. And there I saw the first fathers and the righteous who dwell in that place from the beginning. Chapter 71. And it came to pass after this that my spirit was translated, and it ascended into heaven, and I saw the sons of the holy angels of God. They were walking on flames of fire. Their garments were white, and their faces shone like snow. And I saw two rivers of fire, and the light of that fire shone like hyacinth, and I fell on my face before the Lord of spirits. And the angel Michael, one of the archangels, seized me by my right hand and lifted me up and led me out into all the secrets. And he showed me all the secrets of righteousness. And he showed me all the secrets of the ends of heaven, and all the storehouses of all the stars, and all the lights from where they proceed before the face of the holy ones. And he translated my spirit into heaven of heavens, and I saw there as it were built of crystals, and between those crystals tongues of living fire. Side verse, Revelations 21:10. And he carried me away in the spirit to a great and high mountain, and showed me that great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God. Verse 11 of Revelations chapter 21. Having the glory of God, and her light was like unto a stone most precious, even like a jasper stone, clear as crystal. My spirit saw a circle of fire binding around the house of fire, and on its four sides were rivers full of living fire, and they encircled that house. And round about were seraphim, cherubim, and orphanim, and these are they who slept not and guard the throne of his glory. And I saw angels who could not be counted, 1,000 thousands and 10,000 times 10,000, encircling the house, and Michael and Raphael and Gabriel and Phanuel and the holy angels who are in heaven above go in and out of that house. And they came out from the house, and Michael and Gabriel, Raphael and Phanuel, and many holy angels without number. And with them the head of days, his head white and pure as wool, and his raiment indescribable. And I fell on my face, and my whole body melted, and my spirit was transfigured. And I carried with a loud voice in the spirit of power, and I blessed and glorified and exalted. And these blessings which came from my mouth were very pleasing before the head of days. And the head of days came with Michael and Gabriel, Raphael and Phanuel, and thousands and 10,000s of angels without number. And the angel came to me and greeted me with his voice, and said to me, This is the Son of Man, who is born to righteousness, and righteousness abides over him. And the righteous of the head of days forsakes him not. And he said to me, He proclaims to you peace in the name of the world to come. For from there peace has proceeded since the creation of the world, and it shall be with you forever and forever and ever. Side verse, John 17:24. Father, I will that they also, whom thou hast given me, be with me where I am, that they may behold my glory, which thou hast given me, for thou lovest me before the foundation of the world. Back to verse 16. And all shall walk in his way, since righteousness never forsook him. Their dwelling place shall be with him, and it will be their heritage, and they shall not be separated from him forever and ever and ever. And so there shall be length of days with the Son of Man, and the righteous shall have peace and an upright way in the name of the Lord of spirits forever and ever. Side verse, Hebrews 4, verse 3. For we which have believed do enter into rest, as he said, as I have sworn in my wrath, if they shall enter into my rest, although the works were finished from the foundation of the world. Chapter 72. The book of the courses of the luminaries of heaven, the relations of each according to their name, origin, and months, which Uriel, the holy angel, who was with me, who is their guide, showed me. And he showed me all their laws exactly as they are, and how it is with each of the years of the world and to eternity, until the new creation is accomplished which endures until eternity. And this is the first law of the luminaries. The luminary, the sun, has its rising in the eastern doors of heaven, and its setting in the western doors of heaven. And I saw 6 doors in which the sun rises, and 6 doors in which the sun sets, and the moon rises and sets in these doors. And the leaders of the stars, and those whom they lead, 6 in the east and 6 in the west, and all following each other in accurately corresponding order. There were also many windows to the right and left of these doors. And first there goes out the great luminary, named the sun, and his sphere is like the sphere of heaven, and he is quite filled with illuminating and heating fire. The chariot on which he ascends, the wind drives, and the sun goes down from heaven and returns through the north in order to reach the east, and is so guided that he comes to the appropriate door and shines in the face of heaven. In this way he rises in the first month in the great door, which is the 4th. And in that 4th door, from which the sun rises in the first month, are 12 windows, from which proceed a flame, which they are opened in their season. When the sun rises in heaven, he comes out through that 4th door 30 mornings in succession, and sets accurately in the 4th door in the west of the heaven. And during this period, the day becomes daily longer, and nights grow shorter to the 13th morning. On that day, the day is longer than the night by a 9th part, and the day amounts exactly to 10 parts, and the night to 8 parts. And the sun rises from the 4th door, and sets in the 4th, and returns to the 5th door of the east 30 mornings, and rises from it and sets in the 5th door. And then the day becomes longer by 2 parts, and amounts to 11 parts, and the night becomes shorter and amounts to 7 parts. And it returns to the east and enters into the 6th door, and rises and sets in the 6th door 130 mornings on account of its sign. On that day, the day becomes longer than the night, and the day becomes double the night, and the day becomes 12 parts, and the night is shortened and becomes 6 parts. And the sun mounts up to make the day shorter and the night longer, and the sun returns to the east and enters into the 6th door, and rises from it and sets 30 mornings. And when 30 mornings are accomplished, the day decreases by exactly 1 part, and becomes 11 parts, and the night 7. And the sun goes out from the 6th door in the west, and goes to the east, and rises in the 5th door for 30 mornings, and sets in the west again in the 5th western door. On that day, the day decreases by 2 parts, and amounts to 10 parts, and the night to 8 parts. And the sun goes out from that 5th door, and sets in the 5th door of the west, and rises in the 4th door for 130 mornings on account of its sign, and sets in the west. On that day, the day becomes equal with the night in length, and the night amounts to 9 parts, and the day to 9 parts. And the sun rises from that door, and sets in the west, and returns to the east, and rises 30 mornings in the 3rd door, and sets in the west in the 3rd door. And on that day, the night becomes longer than the day, and night becomes longer than night, and day shorter than day, until the 13th morning. And the night amounts exactly to 10 parts, and the day to 8 parts. And the sun rises from that 3rd door, and sets in the 3rd door in the west, and returns to the east. And for 30 mornings rises in the 2nd door in the east, and in like manner sets in the 2nd door in the west of heaven. And on that day the night amounts to 11 parts, and the day to 7 parts. And the sun rises on that day from that 2nd door, and sets in the west in the 2nd door, and returns to the east into the 1st door for 130 mornings, and sets in the 1st door in the west of heaven. And on that day the night becomes longer, and amounts to the double of the day, and the night amounts exactly to 12 parts, and the day to 6. And the sun has traversed the divisions of his orbit, and turns again on those divisions of his orbit, and enters that door 30 mornings, and sets also in the west opposite to it. And on that night has the night decreased in length by a 9th part, and the night has become 11 parts, and the day 7 parts. And the sun has returned and entered into the 2nd door in the east, and returns on those his divisions and of his orbit for 30 mornings, rising and setting. And on that day the night decreases in length, and the night amounts to 10 parts, and the day to 8. And on that day the sun rises from that door, and sets in the west, and returns to the east, and rises in the 3rd door for 130 mornings, and sets in the west of heaven. On that day the night decreases and amounts to 9 parts, and the day to 9 parts. And the night is equal to the day, and the year is exactly as to its day 364. And the length of the day and of the night, and the shortness of the day and of the night, arise through the course of the sun. These distinctions are separated. So it comes that its course becomes daily longer, and its course nightly shorter. And this is the law and the course of the great luminary, which is named the sun, and his return, as often as he returns, 60 times, and rises forever. And that which rises in the great luminary, and is so named according to its appearance, according as the Lord commanded. As he rises, so he sets and decreases not, and rests not, but runs day and night, and his light is sevenfold brighter than that of the moon. But in regard to size, they are both equal. Chapter 73. And after this law I saw another law dealing with the smaller luminary, which is named the moon. And her orbit is like the sphere of heaven, and her chariot in which she rides is driven by the wind, and light is given to her in measurement. And her rising and setting change every month, and her days are like the days of the sun. And when her light is uniformly full, it amounts to the 7th part of the light of the sun. And thus she rises, and her first phase in the east comes out on the 13th morning, and on that day she becomes visible, and constitutes for you the first phase of the moon on the 13th day, together with the sun in the door where the sun rises. And the 1/2 of her goes out by a 7th part, and her whole disk is empty, without light, with the exception of 1/7 part of it, and the 14th part of her light. And when she receives 1/7 part of the half of her light amounts to 1/7 part and the half thereof. And she sets with the sun, and with the sun rises, the moon rises with him, and receives the half of 1 part of light. And in that night, in the beginning of her morning, in the beginning of the lunar day, the moon sets with the sun, and is invisible that night with the 14 parts and the half of one of them. And she rises on that day with exactly a 7th part, and comes out and recedes from the rising of the sun. And in her remaining days she becomes bright in the remaining 13 parts. Chapter 74. And I saw another course, a law for her, and how according to that law she performs her monthly revolution. And all these Uriel, the holy angel, who is the leader of them all, showed to me, and their positions, and I wrote down their positions as he showed them to me. And I wrote down their months as they were, and the appearance of their lights, until 15 days were accomplished. In single 7th parts she accomplishes all her light in the east, and in single 7th parts accomplishes all her darkness in the west. And in certain months she alters her settings, and in certain months she pursues her own peculiar course. In 2 months the moon sets with the sun, in those 2 middle doors, the 3rd and the 4th. She goes out for 7 days, and turns about and returns again through the door where the sun rises, and all her light is full. And she recedes from the sun, and in 8 days enters the 6th door from which the sun goes out. And when the sun goes out from the 4th door, she goes out 7 days, until she goes out from the 5th, and turns back again in 7 days, into the 4th door, and accomplishes all her light. And she recedes and enters into the 1st door in 8 days. And she returns again in 7 days into the 4th door, from which the sun goes out, Thus I saw their positions, how the moons rose and the sun set in those days. And if 5 years are added together, the sun has an excess of 30 days, and all the days which accrue to it for one of those 5 years, when they are full, amount to 364 days. And an excess of the sun and of the stars amount to 6 days. In 5 years, 6 days every year comes to 30 days. And the moon falls behind the sun and stars to the number of 30 days. And the sun and the stars bring in all the years exactly, so that they do not advance or delay their position by a single day to eternity, but complete the years with perfect justice in 364 days. In 3 years there are 1,092 days, and in 5 years 1,820 days, so that in 8 years there are 2,912 days. For the moon alone, the days amount in 3 years to 1,062 days, and in 5 years she falls 50 days behind to the sum of 1,770. There is 5 to be added, 1,062 days. And in 5 years there are 1,770 days, so that for the moon the days 6 in 8 years amount to 21,832 days. For in 8 years she falls behind to the amount of 80 days. All the days she falls behind in 8 years are 80. And the year is accurately completed in conformity with their world stations and the stations of the sun, which rise from the doors through which the sun rises and sets 30 days. We will stop there for this week and pick back up next week in chapter 75. I pray that you have a blessed week, and if you don't mind, hit that like button, and if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. That would be great. And if you're feeling really generous, go ahead and leave me a comment. All of those just helps YouTube's algorithm get these videos out to more people. So I look forward to talking to you all again, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.